Greetings. Welcome to the NASCAR and NBC Podcast. I'm your host, Nate Ryan, joined this week by NASCAR and NBC analyst Steve Letarte. And Steve, I don't know about you, but I'm pretty pumped up. Indianapolis Motor Speedway this week, Brickyard 400 on the oval for the first time since 2020. So let's start with Indianapolis itself. I can remember my first Brickyard 400 was 2002. Bill Elliott won, and I was somewhat overwhelmed by the entire scene. What were your first memories of the Brickyard 400? What was your first trip?
This is like a loaded question to show my age. So here's the truth. The day that Jeff Gordon won the inaugural Brickyard 400, I was riding in the back seat of a blue station wagon from Maine to North Carolina, because that was the day that we moved to North Carolina. Was the day of the inaugural Brickyard 400. So I listened for that one on the radio. And then in 95, I didn't go, but I was able to go in 96. So I've been to the Brickyard from 96 on. And the memory, I remember going there for the first time. It reminds me of when I went to Daytona for the first time. So I was about 11 or so when I walked out on the front stretch at Daytona in the stands and saw the pack come by on a what was the time, Twin 125s, the Gatorade Twin 125s. And in my head, I couldn't imagine how fast the cars were going. And I had that same sort of feeling. Now, I wasn't able to go to Indy as a fan. I went as a crew member. But I'll never forget kind of pushing the car out for qualifying through Gasoline Alley. And there's the big pylon, and here's the front stretch. And it was just a moment that, as a young kid, I didn't think I'd ever get to, right? Indianapolis was never on the radar. I was definitely not an IndyCar guy, but there's something about it. I think Jeff Gordon says it the best. It's most of the tracks that we get to attend in NASCAR were built by NASCAR, the history and all of that. And this isn't. So it's great to feel like a really welcomed guest. And that's what I feel like it's like when NASCAR goes to Indianapolis. And for good reason, we had to leave the oval, and I agree with it. And I completely agree with going back to the oval. I think, distance does make the heart grow fonder, because while the road courses did add a level of excitement for a while, there is something about racing at what is truly the Brickyard that I think is going to be special. And I think that's what I'm looking forward to this weekend. We could talk a lot about the cars, and I'm sure we'll get into all this, but I can't wait to see the Todd Gillilans, the Harrison Burtons, the younger drivers, younger crew guys, younger crew chiefs that have just shown up on the scene, and they've never got to experience this. And I hope we get a huge crowd down that front stretch. I mean, we're not going to pretend we're going to fill the place like we used to, or like Indy does. But if we can get maybe, 75,000 people or 80,000 people, and they kind of condense them into that front stretch, it really has this feel like a little bit of a cauldron of fans going down the front stretch. So I hope we can fill it up a little bit. It's a special place for sure.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you brought up. There are 10 full-time Cup drivers who will be making their first Brickyard 400 start, first oval Cup start at Indianapolis. Many of these guys have run the road course, but Austin Cindric, Noah Gragson, Chase Briscoe, Harrison Burton, Todd Gilliland, Justin Haley, Ty Gibbs, Carson Hocevar, Zane Smith, Josh Berry, all of these guys have never run the oval in the Cup Series. So, what would that be like, I guess, being a crew chief for one of those guys and trying to get them up to speed of what it's going to be like racing this track where I know Austin Cindric doesn't need to be told that because he grew up around Indianapolis Motor Speedway. I mean, he tells great stories about being as a kid at the Indy 500 because his dad was president of Team Penske for the last quarter century. But for all these guys who have never raced on the oval before, like what kind of instructions would you give them as a crew chief?
The first thing I would say is don't let the benign shape fool you. There's not a corner here that's similar or the same. 1 and 3 are nowhere near alike. I don't care if they're at the end of the longer straightaways, and I don't care that they look 90 degrees on the track map. They don't drive anything alike. They don't look alike in the car data. They're very, very similar shapes, but they don't drive that way. 2 and 4 do not drive alike at all either. I would tell you if you're good in 2 and 3, you're going to have a great Brickyard 400. 1 and 4 seem to be the easy corners, or the easier of the 4. That's something about it. I think because 1 is easier, you end up carrying more speed through 2, which makes 2 very, very difficult. With as much tire that's on the ground with these cars, it's almost a straightaway from 1 to 3. I mean, you'll still lift through 2, but it's such a fast corner. It's almost like a kink than it is a real corner. And then all that does is barrel you off into 3, which I believe is the toughest corner in all of Indianapolis, right? I think turn 3, whether it's the wind, the lack of stands, I'm not sure what it is about that corner, but that thing is just odd. It doesn't even look right in the data. You look at it and you're like, well, this can't be what I think it is, because it's just a funny looking corner. And the other thing is Indianapolis in a day of racing where it's 2 and 3 wide. Pocono, we were 5 wide into 1. Every corner we're 2, 3 wide. We're pushing, we're shoving, we're doing all these things. I hope it is as narrow as it was ever as a racing group. I hope we are threading a needle. I want to see, and I know the race fans are going to hate when I say that, I don't want 2 wide in turn 1. I hope there isn't a second. I hope this is lap 190 of the Indy 500 all over again, where if you miss your mark by a couple feet, you will pay a gigantic penalty because it'll be dirty offline and you'll have to get out of the gas. And the reason I say that is because I believe the toe in this car and the draft in this car, I didn't say I didn't want passing. What I don't want is bulldozers side by side all the way around the place beating and banging. I want a little quintessential Indianapolis racing, which is be very, very good, understand your run, time your run, get a toe down the front stretch, give up turn 1, back off the corner, run through 1, time turn 2, pass them down the back stretch. I want to see Jeff Gordon, Tony Stewart, Dale Jarrett. I want to see those styles of passes again. I'm hoping this car will provide it. And I believe if that exists, we're going to see Truex and Hamlin and, the likes of some of these veterans, Brad Keselowski. Some of these veterans might be able to kind of dance on that edge. There's something about it. I don't know. Maybe I'm old school, but there's something about that track that I want it to look like the Indy I know.
Well, you raised a few good points there. I want to start with 27 times they've run the Brickyard 400 on the oval in the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, NASCAR's Premier Series. 15 winners, 8 are NASCAR Hall of Famers. 3 more are destined to be. So clearly, you just talked about it. Is it fair to say this is a really technical track that demands like just a phenomenal skill set and precision from a driver to be really, really good?
You'd have to just do everything right all weekend. What people don't realize about the month of May in the Indianapolis 500 is normally a lot of winners are eliminated weeks before you take the green flag. They mess up in practice. They mess up in qualifying. It's not weeks now, but now it's like a week, right? If you qualify outside the top, 10 probably, your Indy 500 chances have dwindled quite a bit. Not saying it's impossible, but it's really, really tough. And I think for NASCAR, it's going to be the same way. You're going to have to really utilize your short practice. You're going to have to qualify well. Pit road is narrow. You have to qualify well to get a good pit stall towards the turn 1 end. Pit stalls are 6 miles long. So it's very easy for the driver to completely mess up a pit crew. I'm actually thinking that's a bigger story than ever. Because on a 4-tire pit stop, you can make up for it with it had 5 lug nuts and there are 14 seconds. But now with the choreography at about a 9.1 or a 9.2, I think if the driver misses his sign, it is going to completely mess up. And these will be the longest pit stalls that some of these young drivers have ever been in. And it's just technical. It demands respect of the racetrack, even out there by yourself. I don't mean guys are going to go in there and miss the corner, hit the wall. They're not running 235 like an Indy car, so you won't run out of real estate quite as quickly. But, there is no second lane with the sticky stuff like at Pocono. The old style Pocono, when you drove into 3, before we had the pavement strip, before we had all those things, if you missed 3, you lost 3 spots into 1. That was just what happened. And now there's a lot of recovery, and this car recovers. And I believe that Indy was still going to pay that penalty, right? You're going to have to not learn, because these guys are the best stock car drivers in the world, but their skills will be tested because they're going to have to hit that same, 1 foot, maybe 2 foot area at the apex of every corner time and time again. And when you start changing the shape of your corners, that's what does the whole thing. I remember like it was yesterday when I was Jeff Gordon's crew chief, we went there and we were 25th in practice. And he's driving straight down into turn 1. Everybody else has these beautiful arcs and they're killing us. And I'm like losing my mind. I'm so frustrated. And he's like, no, the car's good. And I I'd even been there a bunch of times as a crew member, but I didn't understand. And they drop the green and everything looks normal. And about the third time by, he gets a run on somebody, pops out right at the end of the straightaway and drives straight down into turn one, clears him and moves on. And it like hit me. I'm like, oh, he was practicing how we're going to race. Like his ego didn't care that we weren't on top of the board. He made sure that he knew to pass, I have to be able to take this very inappropriate angle into the corner. It has to do what I want it to do. And right then it taught me that the Stewarts, the DJs, the Jeff Gordons, the Jimmy Johnsons, the multi-time winners, you mentioned it, all the different winners, but the guys that did it often and more than once, they knew what they needed before the green flag ever fell. They were running a different race than maybe everybody else did because it's not obvious, because the track is so narrow and it invites you to just run it one singular way. People that find a different way around there find success.
Yeah, I think we know it certainly favors guys like you mentioned. I mean, Jimmy Johnson, Jeff Gordon, Dale Earnhardt, Dale Jarrett, like that list of winners, hugely impressive. But there is going to be an unknown this year, Stevie, and that it is the first time for the next gen car at Indianapolis Motor Speedway. And I heard Jeff Burton talking about this today, and Burton has said very astutely, I think, that this car seems to race better the faster it goes. So he said this in the Pocono broadcast, he's enthusiastic that the next gen could change the racing a little bit in Indianapolis with more action. What you've got, I think, more downforce, basically on the outside for outside passes. But to your point, it's still Indianapolis. It's still that narrow front straightaway. So it's not necessarily going to mean we're going to see side-by-side action every lap, right?
No, but I think here's what I think. So I believe the old car, if you stood above it. So I use this analogy today. I'll use the hose analogy. The old car was like pulling your garden hose in trying to water your flowers with that mist, that nice wide spray. That was the dirty air of the old car. It was not super condensed, but very wide and very dirty. So it was very hard to stay within 2 or 3 car lengths of the car in front of you through turn one. So for that reason, you would come off turn 2, 3 car lengths back, and the draft just wouldn't allow you to make up those 3 car lengths to make a pass. So people talked about the dirty air. The next gen car is like pulling a garden hose on the stream, not like the mist. So while it is very intense, it's very narrow. The dirty air line for the next gen car is much narrower than it ever was with the original generation car, or what I call the old car. But so you can't run behind them. But you only have to be a couple 3 feet to the left or a couple 3 feet to the right, and you regain your aero advantage. So what all of that means is, I don't think they're going to drive through turn one side by side, but they're going to be able to drive through turn one, and the guy who's better can offset a little to the right, get that downforce, and time his run and make a pass. And I think that's the key. I'm not looking for side-by-side racing. I'm looking for options. I want better cars to be able to pass slower cars. That's all I want. And I don't want 3 very good cars to be able to pass one another. I know nobody wants to say that, but I think strategy matters. I think execution matters. I think pit stops matter. I don't want the 4th place car to get the lead and then have the guy who was leading just so much better he drives up and passes him. I want the guy that was the leader to realize he should have kept the lead. Now, the opposite of that is I don't want a 25th place car to just instantly be able to lead the Brickyard 400. I want your car to have to drive good enough to be in the conversation. Then I want you to have to execute to be the best of the conversation.
I think I heard you say this today, that you feel like there's 15 guys who, if they get the lead after the final restart, they're probably going to hold it. That's kind of what you expect? Yeah.
I mean, it's going to be no different than Pocono. I mean, Ryan Blaney won that race when he flipped stage 2. We can talk about everything else we want to talk about, but that was it. One time, all day long, there was a pass between the 11 and the 12, and it happened on pit road. It didn't even happen on the racetrack. They never passed each other. And like, that's how it works. Now, I'm not sure it would have stayed that way if it had run green. Like, I understand why the 11 did what they did. I understand why they won the stage. I understand why they sat. I think they sat a little too long in fuel. I think Gabe Hart would admit himself that he didn't know it was going to take 14 and a half seconds. Maybe he should have just put 13 seconds worth of gas in and made up for the other second on the green flag pit stop, right? There's all these little nuances that I've kind of looked at. But the pass was the decision to flip stage 2. There will be a much smaller window to short pit a stage, so I don't think there'll be a whole lot of cars that do that in Indianapolis. You can only be about 5 or 6 seconds behind the leader. So that's going to be a small window of cars, if any. And so, if Denny Hamlin leads Blaney, I think Hamlin wins. If Blaney leads Hamlin, I think Blaney wins. If Alex Bowman gets in front of both of them, I think Bowman can win. Like, I believe that, like I said today on the call, there's 15 drivers, assuming they bring the type of equipment we've consistently seen them bring. They're going to be really hard to beat if they get out front. Now, that's assuming I'm talking a short run, 5-6 laps, right? That doesn't mean that your tires may not go away, your car might start handling bad, maybe I'm better in the long run. There's other stories. But, I mean, there's a lot about controlling the race.
So strategy, like you said, at Pocono, so important. That fuel.
So I use a
fill,
different word. So I say strategy at Pocono. For Indy, I really would use the word execution. You can't. So when we went to double file restarts, this was the track that made everybody's head explode. Mark Martin, I thought, was going to lose his mind because he's like, so you're telling me I've worked all day long to be second in the Brickyard 400, and then I'm going to have to restart outside row 1? I'm going to come off turn 2 like 6th. And he was not completely wrong, not completely right, but I completely understood where he was coming from. So execution, the choose, the restarts, fuel fill, tire count, yes, strategy, but more than that. When you said it was a technical race, I think it's going to be technical for the entire race team.
And I definitely want to talk about Brickyard, but just pulling back, zooming out for a second, the fuel conservation game. I mean, it really struck me watching Pocono. I know this isn't new. This is very much, to me, it seems like the last few years of the next gen. It was like one day we woke up and the Daytona 500 had become like a fuel mileage game. Can you explain what's going on? Is it the next gen? Is it like that? It's 4 simple. Tire stops have gotten shorter, and that's changed the game. Has that just changed the game on fuel conservation completely?
Before we ran the first race in the next gen car, I told someone that this will become a fuel mileage game. And they all thought I was crazy. I'm like, look, there are 36 guys on pit road that all can make a car go faster than me. I'm out of date. I'm 10 years old, out of the garage. I don't know where to put my diffuser, and I don't know how much left front wheel rate I need, and I don't know what bar angle I need, or all of that. But I still think I could stand on top of the box and call one. I feel that's the one part of my game that I haven't lost. If anything, doing television, I've gotten better at it, being able to watch what everybody does. And the day it took 10 seconds to change tires and 14 seconds to fill up fuel, it became a fuel mileage race, every single one of them. And I mean, it's that simple. Even the non-fuel mileage races are fuel mileage decisions. We're pitting to take 4 tires when we need 13 gallons of gas because we don't want to wait on gas. I mean, that is driving every decision. And I actually think it's great. People that don't like it, they want something changed. I totally disagree. I think we in media have to cover the race. The star is the race. And sometimes, and this year we've had it at least twice, it can be a photo finish. But other times, it is in the nuance. It is in the detail. Like Pocono was a spectacular chess game about how much fuel is on board. When the green flag fell at Pocono, everybody needed 80 gallons. That's what you needed to finish the race, 80 gallons of gas. How are you going to put 80 gallons in? You're going to put it in 3 times, 20 at a time? You start with 20, so you need 60 more, right? You stop 3 times, 20 gallons at a time? Or you're going to break it up a different way. Like, this fuel conservation is so much fun to watch. It is a chess game that's being executed by the drivers, and it's run by the crew chiefs and the media, specifically a broadcast media. It's our obligation to continue to improve our tools to tell the story of what's going on the racetrack.
And you mentioned with Gabehart and Hamlin, this must be extremely difficult now for crew chiefs. I mean, it comes down to, if you just wait a little bit too long, if you're calling it off a stopwatch, as I've heard you say now during races, that can be the difference in winning or finishing second.
So let's take last weekend specifically. So Ryan Blaney pits around lap 92. He flips the stage. All right, he goes on to win the race. Denny Hamlin runs to win the stage, playoff point, 10 regular points. I love that. They then come to pit road. Both had done 2 tire stops earlier in the day. Blaney pitted under green, so there was very little penalty to fill his car up. I know people don't understand this, but you're better off having a slow pit stop under green than under yellow. Because under green, even though they're going 180 miles an hour, the field is spread out. 1 second is less positions under green than it is under yellow, not because of the speed of the cars, but because of the proximity of the cars to one another. The opposite at Daytona, it actually flips completely because the pack's together. But like at Pocono, you'd rather be slower under green. So Denny then pits under yellow. Gabehart decides at this point he's going to take his full fuel load because on his next pit stop, he wants to be able to do 2 tires and only about 6 seconds worth of gas. He sits there, and I don't know if it was a slow pit stop or maybe they're not just super efficient on fueling, but it takes 14 and a half seconds. He restarts like outside the top 10. Just 1 second quicker, he would have been like 5 positions higher. So that's where I think in hindsight, it's always easy for me to call you out on Monday. On hindsight, he would have been better off to put like 13 seconds in and drop the jack to try to beat those last few guys, but he doesn't know that in real time. So now they both start the race. Now, there's no doubt that Denny Hamlin needs about 1.5 seconds less fuel than Ryan Blaney. The question is, can Denny Hamlin close in on Ryan Blaney enough where that matters on the green flag pit stop? I don't think it was going to happen. Like Blaney had such a great pace out there. He was letting Buescher, who was the leader, he didn't care about him because he needed 14 seconds worth of fuel. So like he literally on the radios, he's like, don't worry about the 17. We're not racing them. They don't have, back in the day, we would have said, well, they both only have to stop once. So the race was between Buescher and Blaney. It was not. Blaney knew he had Buescher beat because Buescher needed more gas. And they all know this. If you go back and read the transcripts of the radios, which I study a lot on Monday, the top 10 knew how much fuel every other crew chief in the top 10 needed. Like it's a running tally anymore. Now, in the end, we had yellows and it all kind of changed up. But I would have loved, rarely do you say this because cautions usually jumble up the field and make it super exciting. I actually wish Pocono went green. I think it would have been a just breathtaking finish to see who figured it out if the last stage had gone green.
So do teams have like team members just focused on each of their, I don't know how many you would pick out, but they're aware of like how much
they know how much fuel is on every other car in the entire field.
That's wild.
Yeah, because it's 1 point.
How do you keep track?
So it's like, you know how long everyone pit stops are because that's provided information. You could put about 1.6, 1.7 gallons in a second. After 9 seconds, you have to swap from can 1 to can 2. So there's like a 1 second pause. And then from 10 seconds on the pit stop off, now you're dumping at 1.8 seconds a gallon because it's a second can and there's more fuel in it. Like all of that because that's how you do your own car. Well, now you just multiply it by every car. And with technology, we show the pit stop times. Well, there's a feed going out to all media. The feed. You can look at every pit stop time. So you just start everybody with a full tank and you just watch their pit stop time. You also know how much fuel they burn. There's a little bit of an estimate there. Like, I don't think they know. Now, when I say they know, I think they know, they know their own car within, a few ounces. They know their competitors probably within the gallon. And I think that's probably all you have to know, right? Less than a gallon, I don't think matters. It does if you're racing on the racetrack, but that's a separate conversation. But yes, what everybody has. In the booth, amazing. I feel very confident. I don't have those tools, but in the booth, I figure, I knew very confident what the top 6 or 8 needed for fuel just by adding their pit stop time all day long. Just me and my handy dandy calculator. Statman Russell and my handy dandy calculator, we pretty much knew what everybody needed for fuel, we thought.
In the Gen 6 era, would you have been aware, or there just wouldn't have been as much need to know exactly what every competitor had?
I lost Phoenix 2014 to Jimmy Fenning, and I believe it was Carl Edwards specifically because I know he needed less fuel than I did on the last pit stop, and I knew it before he ever came down pit road.
Yeah.
It wasn't as prevalent, wasn't as obvious. So the answer to your question is no, you didn't really know. You kind of knew at times when it turned into that sort of race. But nowadays, those are the races. Now, it's not like that at every track, which I think the fans should love. Darlington, you better have a fast race car, right? Richmond has nothing to do with fuel at Richmond. Tires are a priority. So, we don't have the same thing every week, but this is racing. And like aerodynamics, you're not going to unlearn it.
Yep. Like I said, I want to get back to the Brickyard. You mentioned aerodynamics. I mean, this track puts a premium on that, puts a premium on horsepower. Another stat that I think we always love about the Brickyard 400, 27 times they've run this race on the oval in the Cup Series. 9 times the winner of this race has gone on to win the championship in the same season. That's not a coincidence. We talked about it. This track demands the best out of drivers, and it demands the best out of teams, and they tend to bring, their best cars, least amount of drag, best engines. How much are you looking at this race and thinking whoever wins this race, it's going to be a pretty good title barometer?
I think so. I mean, I think there's the prestige of it and the ego. What racing really just becomes is a battle of egos, which is spectacular, such as sports, right? This isn't the real world, thank goodness. We get to work in this world where win or lose, while there is a financial reward and all of these things, it's still just sports. It is some people's careers because they've chosen to compete in sports, but it's entertainment for the rest of the world. And I think the Brickyard I have circled to see not who wins, I want to know who's good. Because, winning is like a next level type thing. There might be more to the story than winning that you and I haven't dreamt up. Could be a rain shower, could be a lightning hold, could be and you name it, it could happen. And we've seen it. We've seen, I don't know how many overtimes in the Casey Kane win that one year. Like, we've seen it all happen here. But I think we're going to see who can contend. Like, I mean, write it down. Denny Hamlin did the tire test. He is going to be breathtakingly fast. I assume that's going to trickle over to Truex. Bell, when they're good, they're unreal. Now, it's weird because they have some other races where they kind of just miss it. But when they're good, they're really, really good. Ty Gibbs, I mean, I think it's just a matter of time until he wins a race, right? So there's all of JGR I expect to be fast. Unless you see something I haven't seen, I don't think Hendrick is going to be slow all of a sudden. So now you have 8. And I would argue that I actually think the 9 might have been the best car at Pocono. We just never got to see it because he was in traffic so much. And Bowman has his swagger back. Thank goodness. Congratulations to the guy. Overcome those injuries. It's one of the feel-good stories of the year. How could you go against it? But now you have 8 cars full of swagger, right? Like, man, we about filled the top 10 already. We haven't even got to the Ford camp, who Ryan Blaney just won Pocono, and he said, well, that's the captain's backyard, so it's on their mind, right? So no offense to Cindric being the younger of the two, but let's take Logano and Blaney. Well, now we have 10 cars. Like, this is going to be an absolute heavyweight battle. I just don't see a random good run cycling their way into the top 10 or 12. You know how when we start the playoffs and our leaderboard, we kind of have that red chip next to all the playoff drivers? And normally we start at Darlington. I know we won't this year, but we'll get to like mile 250 of the Southern 500, and there'll be 1 or 2 drivers in the top 16 that aren't playoff guys. And you're like, wow, look at that. That's where all the – write it down. Take your 16 playoff drivers, put a little chip next to him. I think there's still a few outliers. Like, I think Bubba Wallace, probably, who's not a playoff driver, will run pretty good, but they're going to fill the top 10. Like, I don't see a new winner at the Brickyard. Matter of fact, I'm not sure I see somebody who hasn't won a race inside the top 5 or 6. Like, I think this is an absolute toe-to-toe, Muhammad Ali, just punch. Just you keep swinging and see who can figure it out.
Yeah, and you named all the favorites. I'm going to come back to those a little bit. But first, I want to talk. Somebody's going to win this race, and it's going to be the first time since Kevin Harvick in 2020 that they're going to get to celebrate an oval win at Indianapolis Motor Speedway. You said your first race there was 96. So I take it the first time you celebrate a win there would have been 98 when Gordon won the Brickyard. Yep. Then what's that like? What's it like celebrating at Indianapolis Motor Speedway? What's it like kissing the bricks?
So kissing the bricks is a moment that you get a picture you'd never expected to get. So victory lanes are very, very special. But if you're fortunate enough to go a few times, they're hard to identify where you are. It's not a memorable, like you and I would recognize Daytona with the building in the background. Other than Daytona, maybe the Martinsville clock.
Yeah.
I could show, I'm not trying to discount victory lane, but if I ran through Jeff Gordon's 80-something wins, you'd be like, I don't know, not sure. Well, I'm going to tell you that when you get to line up as a crew member, there's no second row, there's no back row, there's no guy you can't see over here off camera. You put the driver, the owner, the crew chief in the middle. and then every single person that made that car go gets to line up on the yard of bricks for that picture, there's something equal about it. There's something like, hey, there's no hierarchy here. Like, we're all here. We're all equal. And it's like a moment in time. There's no grittier, slimier, dirtier kiss that you would more love to have in your life than a yard of bricks covered with fuel, oil, and rubber. It's like a special moment where you're like, man, this is so cool. And I think that's what's going to be exciting, is to see these teams do that, because it's real. Like, it's a big deal. And it's so much fun to do.
You got 8 cracks as a crew chief at the Brickyard 400. Your best finish with Jeff Gordon was 5th in 2008. You were 4th in 2012 with Dale Jr. Those were your 2 best finishes. Did you ever feel like you were in the hunt as a crew chief for maybe winning at Indy?
We were close the year the tire debacle. Was that 08? I think it was.
That was 08. Yep.
Mm-hmm. We were on the wrong side of the 2-4 cycle. Jimmy needed 2. We needed 4. I kind of knew our day was over the way that went that day in 9 laps sprints. We were really good with Dale one year. We had the sway bar arm fall off like lap 3 that we recovered from and had a good day. I never had that magical day. I never had that day that thought we should have won it, where it kind of went away. Good runs, but never great runs. And I think that's true. Like, when I go to Martinsville or even Pocono, I can see the car work in my head. I can see everything kind of going. You know, the mystery of Indianapolis, that maybe I hold it with such reverence, is because the damn thing's still a mystery to me. Like, I just never felt it, right? I never knew, like, this is it. We just need this little thing. Like, we were always good. We were just never great. And that place doesn't reward good. It kind of laughs at good. It says, oh, yep. The line for good is over there. It's 30 deep. There's a spot over here for great. You're not invited. We never were able to be great on those days.
Yeah, and like you said, you named off some great names earlier that we certainly expect to be in the hunt. I want to wrap up talking 2024 season here, Stevie. Dale Jarrett on our call earlier today identified what he thinks right now are 4 championship favorites with 5 races to go in the regular season. You got Kyle Larson, Chase Elliott, Denny Hamlin, Ryan Blaney. Those were DJ's 4. And I was a little surprised by that, because no William Byron, no Christopher Bell, 2 guys with 3 wins. But like you said, I mean, Bell in particular has been hit and miss. How do you see things here as we 5 races out from the playoffs starting?
So I have a group I believe that has the firepower that if they find it at the right time, they're going to be hard to beat. And it's much the same. I'm going to start with who I think the 2 at the top are, and that's Denny Hamlin and Kyle Larson. Now, the advantage for the rest of the field is if they continue to run next to one another, you're only going to have to run probably against one of them, because it doesn't seem like they can both make it through the corners and finish. They seem to be running into each other. And I think right behind that, I actually have Bell and Byron. I think that the other 2, I think Bell and Byron have the firepower. Now, has dwindled for both. Byron was on fire early, dwindled in the middle. So, I'm trying to use the whole season to judge this. I do believe Blaney has that ability to step up. So I like that, right? That really gets me to 5. And then I'm not willing to rule Truex out. I do need to see a win. So he has winning speed, but winning speed is not very good. You got to have to win with winning speed. So, he's like, of my 8, he's kind of further down until he can prove me wrong. And I don't really know why that's the way it is. Chase Elliott is unbelievably consistent, and I think has winning speed. So they have to figure out, Alan Gustafson has had 697 cup races in his career. So, he knows how to kind of orchestrate this. That's kind of what I'm waiting to see, right? Is who finds it at the right time. What I see when I look at the playoffs, though, is the peripheral. Like Suarez, congratulations, you're in, you won. I haven't seen the firepower to continue, right? Cindric, kind of the same way, right? There are these teams, no offense, I think Ross Chastain had the best line of the weekend. People are talking about playoffs and points, and he just said not winning with the one team is unacceptable. I loved it. I became a Ross Chastain fan. I said, that's it, exclamation point. Write it down. That's what should be on the back door of your trailer as you walk out for battle. So I think what we should be thankful for is I don't think you can pick 4. I think you can narrow it down to probably 8. And I probably am missing some low-hanging fruit. Like Bowman, we'll see where he goes. Ty Gibbs, I think, he's the type of kid, if he wins, he could become scary quick. But and I also would probably put Chris Buescher in there. Like, I don't know, like he kind of comes and goes. But right now, I think it's a, Hendrick Gibbs battle with a Ryan Blaney cherry on top somewhere out there. And that's really what it looks like. I would say that's your 7 or 8 is Blaney, and then pick 7, right? And that's kind of what I see currently.
And on the other side of it, you just said Ross Chastain. You had the crash of Pocono. Seems like it's coming down to him, Buescher, Bubba Wallace right now. 3 guys for those last 2 spots. Is Ross Chastain, do you think, in trouble? Is he heading the wrong direction right now?
I think Ross, Ty, Buescher. One of them doesn't make it. I think we have another winner, and I think those 3 are in a points battle if they don't know it yet. And whoever is the least points out of those 3 doesn't make the playoffs. I have Bubba Wallace shocking the world and winning Richmond, Michigan, Daytona. I think he has 3 real shots at it. I think that's what scares me. Now Darlington, I think when we leave Daytona, I think the 16 we leave Daytona with is who we're going to have, because Darlington is such a tough challenge. So I know we say we have 5 left. I really think we probably have 4 left. But of the 4, I can make a real case for Bubba at those 3 tracks. You could make really a case for anybody at Daytona. But I do think there's some other options at Michigan. Like, we haven't seen a real crazy Michigan race lately. We haven't really seen a fuel mileage race there, a true fuel mileage race there. So I still think there's enough unknowns between now and the end of the regular season. Not to mention, I'm not ready to throw the towel in on Kyle Busch.
You might be the only one left at this point.
And Olympic break, tire tested at Richmond, dual compound tires. We got options. We got hards. We got softs. We got chaos. The guy hasn't won 19 in a row. I'm not ready to give up yet. He's won 19 in a row. I think he's earned the right to win 20. I think the racing gods will bless him with some sort of good fortune at some point. So I'm not ready to give up on Kyle Busch yet.
Hey, let me say, I don't want to give up on him, because I think NASCAR is a better place when Kyle Busch is running well. I think it's better for NASCAR as a whole for Kyle Busch to make the playoffs. I just think, man, this season, it's almost gotten to the point where it's difficult to watch, because he's a 2-time champion who's just, it's not just the misfortune, but even when there's no misfortune and he's running poorly, he's telling Ricky Stenhouse Jr., I know what it's like to be back here with you now in the middle of the pack. I don't know. It's just, it surprised me, like how it's really almost difficult to watch, if that makes sense.
Oh, it is. It is because the fans love it because they love him or hate him. But I think you and I, like, we're pretty impartial. Like, look, was I happy for Alex Bowman? Absolutely. I'd be happy for anyone who's ridden the road, the roller coaster he's ridden for the last couple of years, right? Like I have like Kyle Busch. If he won right now, I'd be happy for Kyle Busch, right? Not because I'm a fan, but because I am a fan of his talent and his resume. I'm like, man, I want to see him win. I can't wait to see Ty Gibbs win, because he's earned the right to win a race. He runs up front. I think he's going to win a race. Todd Gilliland, I don't think he's winning speed yet, but he has enough good runs where I'm like, man, I want to see that continue. You like to see guys prosper. You like to see performance, because when Kyle Busch wins and Alex Bowman wins and Todd Gilliland runs well, that forces Denny Hamlin to be his best and Larson to be his best. I mean, such is motorsport, right? Like, you want people to be forced to be their best. I'm a huge golf fan, and I hate reduced events. I hate 75 golfers with no cut, because what 150 golfers did is some guy you've never heard of could have the best 2 days of his life, and he forces the best in the world to remind us that they're the best in the world. When the best in the world go play with one another, I think they all play down to each other's level to get to Saturday. It's almost like they're just there on Thursday and Friday to hang out. So I love that those quote surprise or, those breakthrough wins. So we'll see. Now, at the same time, I love to see a guy win 5 or 6 races in a year. And I think, it's interesting. We have 4 guys with 3 and 1 guy with 2.
Right.
That's 14 races and 5 names, right? That's a big chunk.
Yeah, it is interesting how it's broken down, and especially given this stretch that the teams find themselves in. I want to end here, Stevie. I mean, 23 consecutive weeks of racing will end this week, going all the way back to the Clash. And now teams finally get a breather in 2024. They get 2 weeks to kind of reassess things before the final finishing kick, the last 14 races of the season, all the way through Phoenix. This line of demarcation, this kind of like summer break that teams have, how do you think teams will look at it? How do they assess their seasons, and how do they sort of re-energize or regroup for the finishing kick?
Well, I think the answer is different for every team because of their situation, but I do think it will change something. It will change the momentum. You can't say that a halftime doesn't change the momentum of a game, right? So a break in the season, I actually think the off weekends are as important as the races. I know we've gone away from that, but I look back at my career, we used to have maybe 4 of them. I would love to see a couple. I would love to see a first, third break, right before the playoffs. I actually like where this one is in the season. I like to come back. I don't like to stop for the playoffs. I like to come back, run into the playoffs, and then run 10 straight and kind of like hit it running. I wish there would have been one earlier in May to let people that don't have their footing find their footing, because I believe it does make for a more entertaining sport. I think we do have a little bit more cyclical stars, a little bit more cycle of speed. So I can't answer who it's going to affect, but I think if you're a fan of Kyle Busch, you should be looking forward to the 2 weeks, right? And if you're a fan of Ryan Blaney, maybe you should be scared of the 2 weeks because he has found his stride right now. So I, much like you, I know that it will be used to both recharge, refuel, and retool. The question is, I don't know who's going to do it the best. That's what's going to be pretty fascinating.
Yeah, definitely. And definitely looking forward to that break. But first, definitely looking forward to the return of the Brickyard 400 this weekend on NBC. This man will be calling it. And we always appreciate when he joins the NASCAR and NBC podcast to give us his insight. So thanks for being here, Steve.
Appreciate you having me. Great time.
Hi, I'm Parker Kligerman. For more access like this from Pit Road, be sure to click and subscribe to the Motorsports on NBC YouTube channel.